Hi. I can't tell if I look washed out in this little viewfinder. Do I? I think I do. Now can you see me? Now you can't see me. Now you can. Oh, maybe if I turn it down. That's good. If I look super washed out, comment below. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It is Friday by Rebecca Black. I'm very excited to be done with the work week, and it is the last day of the month, and therefore I bring you an April wrap-up and a May TBR, because I'm doing something fun in May. So, am I recording? It's chaos today. Hello, everyone. My name is Jalen. Welcome back to my channel. So, before we get into the wrap up, I'm going to talk a little bit about my new setup. So if you see behind me, disaster, and that's going to change this weekend. This weekend I am filming a bookshelf reorg. I've been changing a ton of stuff in my office. I have a new desk, I have a new reading chair, I have a new lamp up there, I have a plant hanging, so I'm going to do like an office tour, bookshelf reorg. My microphone is scaring the shit out of me right now. Why is it doing that? So yeah, I'm gonna do bookshelf reorg, office tour, answer questions while I do it kind of situation, so that should be fun. So yeah, this is like the before shot of like the shelves, and hopefully have like some, why is it doing that? Sorry you guys, like my fucking volume thing keeps going down and no one's touching the volume, so like what is happening?
But the way it's almost...
Hey Noelle. That's coming soon. Oh, so the reason why I'm telling you this is maybe drop down below like questions or like bookish hot takes that you may have, and I'll like react to them doing a voiceover while I'm like time-lapsing the reorg. That'd be fun. Yeah, give me a question, give me a hot take, give me something, and then I'll just kind of talk and chit-chat about your opinions, your views, your questions. I'll just be chatty for a video while I do stuff. So let's get into the April wrap-up. Oh, I didn't even share what beer I'm drinking. I'm a hot ass mess today. So I have Mother Road Daily Driver Session IPA, my hands down favorite session IPA. It's a 4.8% IPA that tastes like very similar to their flagship, which is a 7.3% IPA. However, if you don't want to get too turned too quickly, this is what you drink. So that's me today. Okay, now let's get into the wrap up. I'm sorry guys. Bear with me. Okay, so I just had to make sure that the audio was recording. I was way too close to the camera, so like apologies for the first 2 minutes of this video where I'm like, okay, so anyways, first book that I read this month was Milk Blood Heat by Dantiel Moniz. This is a short story collection, a debut collection from Moniz that basically covers a bunch of different stories that are looking at a set of characters that are dealing with some kind of like personal grief or reckoning or change in their lives, and these characters kind of processing that all within this backdrop of Jacksonville, Florida generally, or I believe it's just Florida generally. I don't know if it's all in Jacksonville. I could have made that up, I'm sorry. These stories are operating in that kind of area of being very surprising. I did a recent short story video in which I found that many short stories that I find myself drawn to or that I think are very successful are ones that are constantly upping the escalation and offering something that is surprising to the reader, and she does that really excellently here. I think what she's doing in these short stories is examining Blackness and trauma and family in the ways that we are shaped by people around us and the actions that they have against us and the way that we kind of grow as people in light of our personal experiences in a really beautiful way. I know that's kind of like a cliched kind of description of life, I would say, but I think she does this so well by using some very like pivotal moment in these characters' lives and these stories in a very condensed form and looking at the way that race plays into that as well and class. And I think these are really excellent stories. I think it's a very promising debut collection from Moniz, and I think if you're looking for a kind of accessible first foray into short stories, I think this is a really good one for you to check out. Any short story fans out there, definitely try this one out. I think it's really good. I do think, as you know, sometimes happens with short story collections, I think some of these stories are stronger than others, but I do think that it's overall very well-rounded, looking at a bunch of different scenarios and circumstances while all kind of balanced by this kind of underlying examination of personhood and grief and growing through trauma. I think one thing that this book does really well is that it's a very visceral read. Moniz is very occupied with examining bodies, and so it's, I mean, as the title suggests, Milk, Blood, Heat, it's looking a lot at bodies and having that kind of like visceral bodily response to things as well. So I think that's a really interesting theme that's kind of running through this collection as well. So yeah, definitely liked it. Check it out if that sounds interesting to you. Next, I read Outline by Rachel Cusk. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I was so like relieved when I read it because I was very nervous going into it that I would not like this book. So it basically follows this nameless narrator for most of the book, and it's basically pitched as a novel told in 10 conversations in which this narrator, she is in Athens for a brief creative writing course that she's teaching. And so in each chapter, she's having a discussion with someone, the first one being her neighbor on her flight out to Athens. And she has some more conversations with him throughout the rest of the novel in different scenarios as well. And then some of her friends, some colleagues, even the classmates that are in her class, kind of like a classroom discussion that happens in one of the chapters, which was really cool. And yeah, I just really like this. I think this book is way less plot. I mean, there's barely any plot going on here, but I think what floored me about this book was just the writing and Rachel Cusk's ability to distill like very mundane aspects of life and make them seem beautiful and have some kind of like revelatory aspect to them. And there were paragraphs in here where I was just like underlining, like there were whole pages that I was just like, whoa, like the writing was like too good. I think if you want good language, good writing over everything, I think this is the book that you must check out. I think if you're in the mood for something that's not as like plot heavy, if you want something that's kind of just meditative and reflective and thinking about life and is very like existential as well, I think this is a good pick for you. It's kind of hard to sell it because like, yeah, this book, like nothing happens, but it was like good writing, but like it's hard. That doesn't do it justice. I think it's so brilliantly written, and I love that it's a trilogy too. I have the other two in the trilogy, and I'm really excited to see whether she kind of branches out from this kind of 10 conversation feel or what she's going to do in those books that's different from this one. I hope it kind of differentiates itself somewhat. I'm sure it does. I mean, the trilogy is quite lauded critically, so I'm very excited for it. So yeah, check out Outline. It's very good. Next, another stunner of language. I read Bluets by Maggie Nelson. This book, wow, I don't really know how to explain this book. It was an experience, similarly visceral as what I was previously mentioning. So this is a fragmented book that's like part like prose poem, part like essay, part memoir about Maggie Nelson's experience with a man and her heartbreak over him, all set against this theme of blue and her love and longing for blue. The word, the feel of it, the look, the vibe, everything about blue is reflected in these different examinations of her recent relationship and the way that completely devastated her. Her friendship with someone who I believe was in an accident and is now disabled, and her kind of reflecting on all these things while also examining the impact of blue and what it means in different areas, including like literature, culture, in her personal life. It's a weird book. It's told in these very short paragraphs, and they're all numbered. I think there's like 240 of them, I want to say. It's odd. It's very odd. It's hard for me to kind of summarize my thoughts on this book just because it's doing so many things at one time. There's so many like odd reflections that kind of come in, but they're so like beautifully written and sometimes even like darkly comedic as well. And she just has a really brilliant mind. She expands on this aspect of what a color can mean for a person in the ways that color is basically a huge metaphor for a variety of different things, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think if you want some like interesting, experimental, reflective, sad, beautiful writing all combined into one little brief book that you can read in one sitting or kind of dip in and out. That's what I did. I would read some fragments, kind of put it aside for a bit just because it's so much to take in at once. So many different ideas. I think you would really like this one. It's a really, really good book. I love Maggie Nelson's Jane as well this year. I think I prefer Jane to Bluets, but they're both excellent. You can definitely see why people love Maggie Nelson. I think she's a really interesting, innovative writer. So okay, next, I will only talk about this briefly because I covered it a ton on my channel already. I read Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. I absolutely loved this book. I think this is one of the most hyped books that I'm seeing right now on Bookstagram and BookTube. I feel like everyone's talking about it. And sometimes I get a little hesitant of those really, really hyped books because I'm like, is this going to pay off? Like, what's the deal? But this one I think is totally deserving of the praise. I think, so this book follows this love triangle of sorts in which we follow Reese, who is a trans woman, and her kind of navigating her relationship with her ex, who is Ames. He has detransitioned, and now Ames is dating his boss, Katrina, who gets pregnant. Basically what happens is Ames goes back to Reese, who he knows wanted to be a mother throughout their whole relationship, and proposes this kind of interesting triangle parenthood situation in which he's hoping that Reese and Katrina will be open to raising this child all together. And you kind of see them navigating this really sometimes dysfunctional relationship, and you look into the past traumas of both Reese and Ames and how all those things are kind of coming to a boiling point in the present in this very interesting dynamic. And what I loved so much about this book is that I think it's incredible that this book is getting so much attention because it's doing great work in terms of looking at gender and gender theory, reflecting on what it means to be trans, and when someone makes a decision to detransition, what that means, and the implications that has on people around them, and the ways that both trans and cis people, like how they respond to both transgender and people that have detransitioned, like those decisions and how all these things kind of factor into each other and play against each other and the harm that it can do to people. And I think it's just so well written. You can tell throughout the book, Torrey Peters is so like in her bag, like just loving. You can feel her love for what she's writing and how important it feels to her and then to the reader and to the story itself. I just think it's a really excellent novel and something I've never read before. And for that, I have to give it a ton of credit. I think it's awesome, and I love that it's getting so much exposure. So definitely read it if you, one, want to read more about these topics, but also if you just want a really good, like romp, messy relationship book. I think it's really good on that front alone as well. So I gave it 4.5 stars, rounded up to 5. I didn't have any 5-star reads this month, unfortunately, except that one, in terms of fiction, I should say. So next I read Stray by Stephanie Danler. This is her memoir. She had previously written Sweet Bitter, which had a ton of praise in, I think, 2016, I believe. And so this book follows many things in Stephanie Danler's life, but most critically 3 people in her life that had a heavy impact on her. One being her mom, second being her father, and the third being a man that she was in a relationship with while he was married. It kind of jumps around in time and place. Each chapter is told in a different location, mostly in California, but she divides each chapter by telling you like where she is, but it could be when she's a kid, in the present moment, when she's a teenager. And we look at her mother, who was an alcoholic, and both of her parents had substance abuse issues, and you see the way that those issues kind of play out in her family relationship and in her youth up until her adulthood, that she's still dealing with it, and the effects that has on both her parents and her sister, the impact it had on her writing and her just development, and her wondering whether she can kind of escape the cyclical nature of addiction and kind of be her own person despite the addictions that her parents had to go through, especially considering this relationship that she finds herself very deeply embedded in with this man who is in a relationship that kind of reflects those kind of addictive qualities of the other substances that her parents were addicted to, and kind of her attachment to this man and why she attached to him, and her ultimately getting away from him and developing her own self despite all of these hardships that she faced. I do think, while this book is absolutely beautifully written at many times, at certain points I think structurally this book could have used a little bit more fine-tuning. Personally, I tend to dislike when books kind of jump around in time and place kind of like haphazardly. And I mean, I hate critiquing memoirs for these kind of reasons, just because like who am I to tell a writer how to tell their story? I mean, this is obviously deeply personal to her and she made the creative decision, so I completely respect that. I'm just saying from a reader's perspective, I felt sometimes it was a little bit disorienting, and maybe that was the intended effect, but it didn't really have a good flow throughout. However, I do think each individual chapter was just so beautifully written that I think this is worth a read just for the writing alone. I feel so grateful for Stephanie Danler for giving us some more insight into her life and just kind of looking at the way that all of these things kind of played out for her and the ways that she kind of navigated those spaces in a really tough familial setting. So yeah, it's a really great memoir. I did have some qualms with the structure and pacing of it, but I do think it's really worth your time and very, very good overall. Okay, next I read The Third Hotel by Laura Vandenberg, who, if you follow my channel for any amount of time, I feel like I talk about her all the time just based on the one short story collection I read by her called I Hold a Wolf by the Ears back in December, I believe. And that was my favorite short story collection of that year, probably my favorite of all time currently. And so I was really excited to try a novel from her. So this one came out back in 2018, and it follows a woman named Claire who is visiting Cuba, who is now a widow. Her husband recently passed a few weeks prior, and he had planned to go to this film festival in Cuba that celebrates horror films, and he was really excited to see this one director's film called Revolution Zombie, and she ends up going herself. And when she's there, she's sitting deeply in her grief, and she starts to see him around Cuba. And she basically from there starts trying to track him down and follows him and ends up interacting with him. And so this is a very odd, surreal ghost story, very much rooted in grief and navigating these liminal spaces following someone's death, especially someone that you really loved. Even despite having some shortcomings in her marriage, she's trying to grapple with this death and whether what she's seeing is real. Like, is her husband still alive? Is she imagining this? Is he a ghost? Is she really interacting with him or not? And so it's a really mysterious, reflective, and often sad novel. But I think similarly to her short story collection, I was absolutely just like gushing over the writing in this book. She can write a sentence, like, incredible stuff. Going into this book, I was so excited because I loved horror films growing up. I was like a bit of a horror head, and so I don't watch them often now. I feel like I have a way worse constitution for horror films. Side note, when I was younger, I used to watch like Saw and Hostel and everything, like no problems, would sleep right after. Now, like I can't watch those anymore, really. Like I don't want to. Messes me up way more severely now that I'm a grown person. But I was really excited to read Laura Vandenberg take on horror films and grief and all these themes that I tend to like to read in my fiction, I was really excited to see her take on it, and I thought it was so brilliant in the way that she uses like final girl tropes, various horror film tropes to kind of play into this odd mystery of her seeing her husband and her trying to get through her grief and process it. If you want a fever dream style book, I would definitely try this one. I think it's one of my favorites that I've read in that subgenre. I will say that not everything is answered for you really by the end of it, and so if you don't like books that are kind of like ambiguous and kind of leave you like, wait, what did I just read kind of feeling, if you like things kind of buttoned up, I would maybe try something else. But I think if you want something that's kind of just like meditative, reflective, sad, beautiful writing, what the hell am I reading situation, definitely try this one. It was good. Next, I have some nonfiction that I read this month. First, I actually finished it today, Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. It's a bunch of first-person essays from various people that have different disabilities, and I absolutely adored this collection. I am so glad I read it. I read this one in part because it had been on my radar for a bit, but this month was Disability Readathon, which Hannah from Let's Talk About Books Baby put onto my radar, and so I wanted to definitely read at least one book that talks about disability, and this is the one I chose, just because I could see a bunch of different stories and narratives and perspectives from people that have various different disabilities. I thought it'd be a good introduction to this topic, and I think it was so great. This book is understandably very heavy to read at times, but I think it is so rewarding and just so necessary and critical. I think one thing that I hadn't done a lot of research on myself prior to reading this book is understanding ableism and how to combat it every single day, and thinking about different issues from that perspective, and how, especially myself as an able-bodied person, how I can constantly make room to help with access. And one way that I'm doing that is in my recent video, when I was talking about me being like halfway through this book, it was brought to my attention that YouTube does an okay job at doing subtitles automatically, closed captions, but oftentimes they can be quite bad if you speak quickly like myself, or if you speak softly, and often with like proper nouns, it does a really not great job. And so what I have decided to do going forward on my channel is to always edit those captions and make sure that whatever the captions are reflecting what I'm actually saying for people that rely on captions to take in my content. So I'm going to do that going forward. And for anyone that makes YouTube videos that wants kind of like a quick and easy way of doing it, in YouTube Studio, there's on the left-hand side, there's a little section called subtitles, and after your video is done processing, when you upload it, you can go in there and edit the text directly in YouTube Studio. So it's not hard to do at all. It takes a little bit of time, but I think it is so awesome that it's so easy to kind of fix those things and make your content so much more accessible for people. And so I am doing that going forward. If you're watching this and you make YouTube videos, I implore you to do it as well. I think it's really crucial for people that absorb our content, that would like or need closed captions to view our videos, that we should be doing that. And so that's just one, initial step upon reading this book that I want to take to make my content more accessible for people as well. So I think it's a great introduction to learning about these topics and access and disability, and yeah, I'm so glad I read it. So thank you, Hannah, for putting that on my radar. And I really hope that they make like a series out of the Disability Visibility books. I would definitely read, future installments in this. I think it's just so amazing. Next, I have 1 hour left of my audiobook of Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. This book similarly was so great. I think it does a really great job at introducing the reader into the intersectional feminism. This was something that I really wanted to read more about this year, and this is a really great, I think, platform to kind of start thinking about these issues. So what Mikki Kendall does in a series of essays, she looks at a bunch of different topics, often ones that aren't generally considered as being feminist issues. And first she says, these are feminist issues, for example, gun control, hunger, education, amongst many. And so first, Mikki Kendall kind of addresses how these are feminist issues, but she also examines how white feminism is often blind to the needs of other people in these kind of discussions. So whether that's intersection with race, class, sexual orientation, disability, she examines all of these issues and examines how they are feminist issues, and we also need to look at intersectionality and make sure we're considering the needs of all, aside from just the privileged and white people in those groups as well. And so I think overall I learned a ton from this book. I think it's so critical to read, especially if you don't feel as well versed in intersectional feminism. I think this is a really good introduction to it. It was for me. And I think next on this topic that I'm going to read is White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad. I've had an arc of this one for a bit, but I wanted to read Hood Feminism first because I had heard that it's a really good introduction to these topics, and then once you're kind of more well versed and understanding of like the baseline knowledge of intersectional feminism, then to kind of embark on this book. So yeah, that's coming up soon. I want to read that definitely this year. And so the last book that I read this month that kind of segues perfectly into the next part of my video is my May TBR, and it is The War of the Poor by Éric Vuillard. I read this book because I am reading the International Booker Prize shortlist, which consists of 6 books. This is the first time I've ever done a prize following, I guess. And so I talk a lot on my channel about how I don't like setting TBRs. With this one, it sounds fun. I want to try it. So we're going to try it. I've already read 2.5 of the shortlist, so I am going to complete it. I think I feel really confident about it. And so I had 2 on my TBR already. So it seemed like a perfect excuse to actually try to read a shortlist. So I'm doing it. I think it'll prepare me well because I really want to read the long list for the Booker Prize this year. I think if this goes well, I'm going to do that as well. My friend Kieran at Katie Books, he always does the Booker Boy book club long list reading. He does individual reviews for all of them, and I love his content, and I kind of want to partake in the fun too. So I'll be doing that. And the first one I read was, well, not the first one, but the first one I read this month was The War of the Poor. And we're off to a bad start, friends. I hated this book. It is like a 60-page little tiny teeny thing, which I'm so glad it was, because if it was any longer, I would have DNF'd it. And so this one is translated by Mark Polizzotti, and I barely remember what this book was about. Love it. Love that for me. Basically, the key theme of this book is about class and class conflict back in the 1500s. And so basically looks at this kind of class warfare back in the 1500s about the Protestant Reformation and how they attacked the Catholic Church, but how the Protestant Reformation ended up being its own corrupt, privileged authority. So we follow this one guy named Thomas Müntzer, I believe, in the German Peasants' War, and how through language and theses and writing, he's able to spearhead this insurrection at the time. Reflects on Thomas's, journey in doing this, and is it itself a very brief piece of writing that's also supposed to be persuasive in the sense that Thomas's words are as well. And so I get kind of what this book is doing in terms of trying to be this powerful book that's also kind of doing what Thomas is doing back in the 1500s. However, I think this book is so it's just a slog to read. It was so hard for me to get through it. When I pick up historical fiction, this is what I'm always nervous it's going to be. You have to take some time, digesting it, but personally, I did not feel invested in the narrative. It doesn't really feel like a novel per se either. It's just a weird little book, and I'm kind of confused, and I think some others are too online, are kind of confused about why this is on the long list and short list. It is a translated text, so it has that going for it, but the topic is very tough. You look at some kind of bleak circumstances of class warfare back in the 1500s, but I do think I'm having a hard time reviewing the book, if you can tell, just because I did not like it. It was just hard to read, boring. I didn't like the way it was written. I thought it was kind of inaccessible at times, and I did not have fun with it. But that's fine. I think this is going to be the odd man out, probably be my least favorite. I give it 2 stars. I appreciate what it's doing in the form. I think it's crazy how you can condense all that history and analysis into a book that is this small, so that has it going for it, but I just did not like my reading experience whatsoever. I will say, even though this is historical fiction, prior to this I had already read At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. I actually have my own individual video review of that book, which I don't usually do anymore. I don't do individual book reviews, however, I think I'm going to start doing them again. I loved that book. I rewatched it recently in preparation for this, and I gave it 5 stars, adored it. Currently my front runner from the short list. I don't hate historical fiction. I just think I have to be a little choosy about what I read in that context. So yeah, so I've read The War of the Poor, A Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, and then I'll be partaking on the rest of the short list. Right now I'm halfway through The Employees by Olga Ravn, and I really, really like it so far. It's this really weird, futuristic, sci-fi-ish novel that's experimental in form in terms that it's composed of these different statements of these employees upon this spacecraft, and it's basically this kind of takedown of capitalism in the workplace in the office setting through this really interesting sci-fi futuristic AI versus human perspective. It's really cool. So full thoughts to come of that. I really like it. I was taking notes while reading it, which I don't usually do, and so it's always a good sign I'm really gonna love a book. So I also have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enríquez coming up on the TBR. I bought that back in January, and so I was excited to see it on the short list because I'm dying to read Mariana Enríquez and that collection. I think it's going to be great. I also purchased, I think in February, In Memory of Memory by Maria Stepanova. Also very, very excited for that one. It's Russian, basically looking at a woman who's going through her deceased aunt's belongings and kind of reflecting on those belongings, and it takes different forms throughout, and so I think that'll be really cool. And then finally I have When We Cease to Understand the World, final one in the short list, and I'm excited for that one as well. Don't even know what it's about. I think it's also historical fiction, maybe. I think it's also about physics, if I remember correctly, so nothing I would ever pick up on my own, so that'll be interesting to see if I like it. But yeah, I'm really excited to read the rest of the short list. I really like 2 of them so far, so that's a good sign, and I think I'm really gonna like, for sure, Dangers of Smoking in Bed and In Memory of a Memory. Yeah, Full Thoughts to Come. That's kind of like my May TBR. I know I'm gonna read those. Otherwise, I'm gonna be mood reading as usual, and so to come, I will have an International Booker Shortlist video in which I review all of the books, reflect on it, give my kind of tier ranking, what I think should win, what I think will win, before the winner is announced on June 2nd. So keep an eye out for those videos if you're interested. I think it'll be really fun, and hopefully it goes well. I want to make more of these kind of like set TBR videos so you kind of know what I'm reading. Yeah, it'll be fun. So that about does it for my April wrap up and May TBR. Like I said, to come, I'm going to reorganize these bookshelves, so I kind of gotta... Oh my god, I'm so dreading it, you guys. I think I have too many books. No shit, Jalen. I think I can't fit all my books in the bookshelf without doing the stacking in front, so I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I'm either gonna have to stack books in front, find another place for them, unhaul. I don't want to. I don't think I have any really want to unhaul right now. Maybe I'll unhaul some Kings. I don't know. I haven't really read King in like 2 years, but I have like a collection of his stuff and I don't really want to part with it. I don't know. We'll see. So that should be a fun video. I feel like it's gonna be chaotic. I don't know what's gonna happen, but that is to come. So thank you for watching this April wrap up. I feel like this was chaotic. I'm sorry if my thoughts are all over the place. I feel like I'm talking too quickly, so I'm so sorry. But yeah, until next time, cheers.